Welcome, everyone. Super excited for this session on ideating and delivering the impossible. Lessons from the Automation Anywhere CoE and their journey from Agentic Process Automation. Super excited to get into this content. I'll start with our generic safe harbor disclaimer. Forward-looking statements, use your best judgment here. We're trying to help you with growing your program, so keep that in mind. But if you want to refer back to this legal statement, please do so. Let's get into some introductions. My name is Micah Smith, and I lead the community and learning team here at Automation Anywhere. I previously have led an automation program myself, so this is absolutely a labor of love. Every time I get to talk about helping automation program leaders do and be their best, I'm happy to be joined today by none other than
Mark Goodair.
There he is.
Very nice to be able to have this conversation, Micah, and excited to be here. This has been a cool journey for us. Like you said, it's a labor of love. Same here, just to see the evolution and the kind of the moment that we have and the opportunity in front of us. Always lots of fun. So looking forward to the conversation.
Absolutely. And Mark and I have a history of doing these types of sessions together, and it's always a bunch of fun. It's always a great conversation. I want to get us started by grounding us in some agentic terminology. If you've seen some of the other sessions we've done, you may have seen this already. If you're watching this in isolation, then I want to make sure that we're all grounded in the same terms. But no doubt that if you've been on LinkedIn recently, you have been absolutely inundated with people giving their opinions of AI agents and agentic workflows and what all of this means. And I want to be really clear with you on how we at Automation Anywhere see this. And if you walk away from nothing else from this session, I want you to at least be able to describe what agentic process automation is. So let's talk through some of these key phrases that you're likely to hear over the next hour, also in other sessions that you're watching as a part of this event. And I want to make sure we all have a common understanding of these terms. So first off, agentic process automation. Think of this as the framework for automating your complex business processes through the orchestration of AI agents and tools to achieve your business outcomes with appropriate controls and guidance. And those last two phrases are key there. Control and guardrails are really big to making sure that we appropriately safely implement agentic process automation. Now, agentic process automation is powered by AI agents, and we want to think of AI agents as systems that coordinate the use of tools to accomplish objectives with varying degrees of autonomy. And I say that because there's really a spectrum of autonomy when it comes to AI agents, from doing basic analysis and predefined decisions to contextual reasoning with autonomous goal completion. And this is an area that we're going to see continue to evolve during the next years as we move towards greater levels of autonomy. The last phrase I want to introduce is this concept of tools. And think of tools as discrete capabilities that AI agents can utilize to accomplish their goals. So this includes everything from task bots and API tasks and cloud services and APIs and processes and AI skills and document automation, all of those things. So if we roll all of this up to one definition, we would say that agentic process automation is the framework that orchestrates AI agents that coordinates the use of tool execution. Okay, that is a screenshot-worthy slide right there. Jumping back into the conversation at hand, though, I want to talk about what it looks like for moving to an agentic process automation COE and that transition. And I want to invite Mark into this because we've both led automation programs and we both know what it looks like for automation programs to start and where they get started. So Mark, talk to me about a couple of these key things. Where did your automation program start and where do you see a lot of automation program starts? What are some of those symptoms that we see over and over?
Sure. Yeah, Automation Anywhere's program is around 5 or 6 years old. And as you said, Micah, there was a day, just like for any organization, for those that are listening, there's a day where that program is born, and kind of you are where you are, you need to get started. And so some of these are very, very common symptoms. Like in the top left, typically we're not dreaming super big. Typically we're focused on task automation. This is not, how do we completely transform the company? probably more limited scope. Most everything runs on a schedule. Obviously solution patterns are a topic that I think is close to our heart, Micah. We've done some sessions at Imagine on that. And that's also very, very typical, is that every automation, you're thinking about, when's this going to run? You're thinking, is it 3 in the morning or 2 in the afternoon? So you end up typically with that kind of solution pattern. The one at the bottom left resonates really deeply. I know we did a session last year at Imagine on this one, but typically your the ways that you measure the program success maybe in the beginning are kind of how many automations or bots have gone out the door, and a hyper focus on productivity. Not a bad place to start at all. Great way to start articulating value. But I think we know as you evolve your program, it broadens into other value drivers as well.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. And I think, even the program that I started and ran at TIAA, we started in IT, and we at the beginning had limited business engagement, and it really took some effort for us to break out of IT, work with different stakeholders, and start to be more proactive about opportunity identification than being reactive. Now, I think the challenge here for automation leaders is that you can get stuck in being this kind of technical center for RPA delivery. And you kind of get boxed into being like, well, we're the people who do cost savings initiatives and we deliver bots, but you're not really thinking beyond that strategy, right? Like, you're thinking of it like an IT program. You're not thinking of it as a strategic center for innovation for your organization. So I want to talk about what it looks like to kind of transition to being more of an agentic process automation COE. So, Mark, I know that you've kind of been through this journey, and I would call this kind of a COE 2.0, the Center for Innovation and Strategic Process Transformation.
Yep.
We've got a few things here, but talk to me about a few of the key things that have been enabled by this transition that you've been through to agentic process automation.
Totally. The one on the top left is obviously pretty key, which is we've really kind of transitioned to being more AI centric. It's interesting because when we talk about things like intelligent automation, AI was a part of our use cases for many of us for several years. A few years ago, we were doing things using other forms of AI, natural language processing, for example. But these days, AI is not kind of a side topic. It really is one of the first things we look at when we're looking at use cases. We're asking, and we're going to get into that, but we're asking questions like, can AI help us with this kind of transformation? So I'd say we've moved to being more AI centric. The bottom left, in terms of the way that we measure the program, we definitely have evolved beyond just looking at productivity. Many of these powerful AI and automation together use cases are driving customer satisfaction, improving our cash flow, so important business metrics, helping us understand the competitive landscape for our company, cost savings, cost avoidance, lots of different dimensions of value in addition to productivity.
I like this.
Yes, and the one at the bottom right that you were just talking about, it's really interesting too. It's kind of like the question of, where do these great ideas come from? Are you just as a COE sitting there waiting for people to come to your desk with their challenges or their ideas? That I view as kind of bottom up, and we have that even within Automation Anywhere. Any employee can submit an idea at any time. We're completely open to that. But you also have kind of the top down, to your point here, of being a little more proactive to say, can we identify some of those more strategic initiatives where we can transform different areas of the company? And it becomes almost kind of more top down of strategic initiatives versus only those ones that are coming from coming from different people submitting ideas.
Yeah, I like that. And I think a lot of that comes from your program being really tied into the strategic objectives of your organization, right? It means I'm paying attention in those town halls because I want to understand what is my leadership value and what are the objectives that they've set out for the organization. And then I want to look at my strategy and my program vision to understand how are we aligning to those things. And that enables me to build a lot of those extensive partnerships. I've got new stakeholders. I'm working with different teams. I'm thinking of things like adoption. I'm thinking of things like the kind of multi-dimensional benefits that my program's delivering. I'm not just thinking about number of bots delivered, what time they run, and how many hours or minutes they save.
Exactly.
So I want to introduce this Pathfinder framework because the question is, how do I lead my automation program through this transition? I saw what we have on that kind of automation or agentic process automation enables the following for my COE. So how do I get there? And the tool that I think helps for this is our Automation Anywhere Pathfinder framework. And this is our methodology for guiding organizations through the 9 dimensions that we think are really important for building and scaling successful automation programs. And this goes from, basic RPA to sophisticated agentic solutions. And this is our proven framework for addressing everything from strategy and governance, as you can see in the top left, to technology delivery and program evangelism. And this is helping organizations to evolve from their very first automation that they've delivered to enterprise-wide agentic transformation. So by providing this structured guidance across all of these key areas, Pathfinder enables us to really equip organizations with the accelerated journey while avoiding common pitfalls and maximizing their business value. So I went over this with Mark, and I gave Mark the lowdown on our Pathfinder framework. To be honest, he helped me build it. So Mark and I talked about this, and I said, Mark, if we're coaching an automation program through this transition from basic RPA to sophisticated agentic solutions, what are the most important things? And then really, what are the 6 key areas here, or I would say the areas where your program saw the biggest changes? And I asked Mark to highlight some of those. And so during this session, what I'd like to do is walk through these 6 key areas where Mark said, hey, you know what? These are the biggest hitters for our program. Mark, any commentary on this before we start to dive into any of these?
No, only that, as you can imagine, the impacts were all over the place to different degrees. And like anything else, it's a maturity process. We continue to change and evolve. But like you said, these are some ones that seemed clear that we had impacts that we had to address pretty early on.
Yeah, I think that's great. And I think, I agree with you. Probably all 9 of these have had some change in some way, but these are the biggest ones that you called out. So I want to go through each of these. Let's start with strategy and vision. It seems kind of obvious that your strategy and vision would need to change as you start to adopt agentic automation. But for those unfamiliar with this framework, we look at strategy and vision as setting the strategic program direction for how AI and automation initiatives can drive business transformation. And this is really about, what is my program doing? What are we capable of? What is our vision? Where are we going? And how are we communicating that? Mark, talk to me a little bit about how your program strategy has shifted over these last few years, moving from kind of automation first to where you are now.
Sure. So a few points here, and it's interesting. The first one here is what changed and what hasn't. I thought that was an interesting question to kind of wrestle with, because the reality is that some things are still nailed to the floor and haven't changed, and that's encouraging because obviously change can be a challenge to work through. So it's encouraging to say, yes, in this AI era, as we move towards the agentic world, yes, a lot of things have changed, but there are some fundamentals that have stayed the same. So an example of things that really haven't changed is we're still after business value. Maybe that sounds obvious, but what you mentioned before, Micah, that we're trying to align ourselves to strategic objectives, we're looking for business value, no different. So if somebody says, I've got a really, really cool agentic idea and we have a value conversation and it's cool, but there's no value there, we may not be very excited about it, right? That kind of ROI value lens hasn't changed. Other things that haven't changed are the fact that we want to be doing that promotion and engagement with different stakeholders. So fundamentals, I think, of how we've engaged different stakeholders also hasn't changed. But then, of course, a number of things have. And there's some examples here. So this move from automated processes to transformed functions, we kind of noticed this just as part of the journey, that the scope of conversations was changing. What I mean by this is Micah, even the conversations we were having, let's say 5 years ago, we were in constant meetings talking about a use case, a process, and how could we optimize it or automate it. what we found as AI came in and as we've moved more and more agentic is, I would say, the scope of impact keeps growing. So some of the stories, for example, that we told at the last Imagine event, they weren't stories of look at a process that we automated. It was look what finance operations 2.0 looks like. So we've moved it up to how should this business function operate in an agentic environment. There will be a number of use cases that feed that, but you can see the level of discussion is entirely different from just looking at a single process.
Yeah, I like that because that means that business function doesn't look like it used to. You don't necessarily have to do things the way that you used to and just plug task bots into that. You're really
Yes.
trying to reimagine what could this business process look like with agentic automation.
100%. And we really shifted, even as a company, it became all about the headlines. And when we talk about a headline, again, we shared a few of them at Imagine in different functions, but when we talk about a headline, all we're saying really is that we want to be able to make a visionary statement in terms of what we want to accomplish. And then after that, kind of decompose it and say, what use cases do I need to bring that headline to life? So as an example, one of the big headlines we pursued was around our time to close the books on the finance side of our company. So we set a kind of bold, ambitious headline that says, we want to reduce our close time by 50%. That became the headline. And then we had wonderful discussions with the finance team to say, what's it going to take to make that a reality, right? What agents do we need? What agentic process automations do we need? That will all work in concert to bring that headline to life.
Yeah, I like that. And your program is definitely aligned to even Automation Anywhere, our corporate strategy, right? If we're going to be the standard for agentic process automation, then that means our own internal program needs to lead the way and needs to be a shining example of that. And I feel like you guys have really adopted that well, and you're taking that full on. If we're moving on to the next section, I want to say let's do one key takeaway from this section, strategy and vision. If there's one thing that you would say, don't forget this, what is it?
Yeah, I think if you were to ask me, one of the biggest challenges has been, if we talk about the strategy and vision section, that last point talks about a mindset shift, and I think that also kind of links to this pro tip. One of the biggest challenges these days, interestingly, is not I don't have the technology, or I don't have the product capabilities. Honestly, most of that has kind of faded into the past, which is making this a lot of fun. Now the questions are, can I think differently? So when I think about how to reimagine a business function, am I able to envision how that would operate? So those challenges are slightly different to think differently. So the pro tip here is uncover the best opportunities by asking slightly different questions. If you're still asking questions that we asked 5 years ago, we probably need to kind of upgrade those questions, and that'll surface these great agentic opportunities.
I love that. Hey, one thing I'll mention, in the resources for this session, we do have a workbook that you can download if you want to be taking notes on some of these key areas, especially on these pro tips that Mark is mentioning. That can be a really valuable takeaway for you. So it has an overview of the Pathfinder framework. It also has slides that look kind of similar to this. So make sure you download that. There's a link in the resources so you can follow along. Mark, killer pro tip. I think that was great. Let's jump over to this next one. And I know this is a really hot topic because I hear automation program leaders bringing it up quite a bit. And this is around governance and risk management when it comes to agentic automation. So from a Pathfinder perspective, we would say that governance and risk management is all about establishing the guardrails that protect while enabling innovation and growth at scale. So it's not about making your work harder. It's about making sure that we're all playing on the same understanding and playing field with the rest of the organization. Mark, one thing that I know comes up over and over is working with and integrating with AI governance councils. Talk to me about the impact of that and how that's really changed the way that your program delivers.
No, it's really, really important. Again, this is something that a couple of years ago we weren't really talking about it. And we've just stood up, just in this last year, we've really stood up an AI governance council. And we consider them, from a CoE standpoint, we consider them a partner. It's really, the minute you talk about, governance councils, it's easy to get in the mindset of, they're going to slow us down. We won't be able to move as fast. They'll kind of get in the way. But very, very quickly, we said we want a seat at the table. Of course, there's a number of different business functions represented on our governance council. You can imagine IT, legal, et cetera, all on that, all that sit there. But we definitely do have a seat at the table. And what we noticed, Micah, was we have a lot of synergies in terms of our objectives. At the end of the day, that governance council is there for the guardrails, but they're also interested in helping make our company succeed in achieving all those corporate objectives. Well, I could put my hand up and say, like, me too. As a COE, our team wants to make sure that we mitigate risks that need to. We accomplish objectives. We deliver lots of business value in a safe way. So having a seat at the table has been really, really key. And then there can be lots of kind of cross education, lots of knowledge sharing about what that means. But many times when a use case comes up and we identify that there's a key role for AI here, we end up bringing that to that council just to make sure that we've checked off the right boxes in terms of, are there any kind of unique risks and how will we mitigate them? And like anything else, Micah, in the beginning, those were kind of brand new conversations we hadn't had before. As we've developed more and more policies and procedures and checks and balances, more and more it's, we've seen this before. We've got the right mitigations in place that we had last time. And basically trust is being developed. So that's been an evolution.
Yeah, I like that. And I think for organizations who aren't Automation Anywhere and are having an AI governance council outside of their automation COE, it's really important to consider how you partner with that organization or with that team, just like Mark said, right? Because they have the objective of keeping the organization safe and driving adoption of AI capabilities. You have the exact two goals, but you also have this capability where you have the ability to build AI agents. You have the ability to build these tools that agents can use, from task bots and screen scraping to API interactions, document automation integration, and really important human in the loop capabilities. And those will be critical to successfully delivering AI powered solutions for your organization. So your AI governance council needs you as much as you need them. Otherwise, these AI capabilities kind of exist in this nebulous form and no one's actually implementing them in a consistent, controlled way. So I would approach it that way. I think there's also, to what Mark mentioned, there's lessons learned that they will take from you. If you're running this automation program from the start, you've been through the process of like, okay, how do we set up governance for which applications we will and will not automate and how we're going to automate them, and change management and access for bots that aren't people and non-human accounts, right? Like, you've been through a lot of these things that an AI governance council is going to have to tackle. So that's another great reason to partner with them.
100%. And on that point, Mike, again, it's back to that theme of, some things have changed, some things haven't. When did our COE start thinking about the sensitivity of data? The day it was born. So AI, right? So AI maybe amplifies that, but if there's going to be sensitive data, making sure that it's being handled properly in that solution and protected in the right ways, that's not a new theme. It's just that AI has kind of opened and spotlighted it again.
Mark, last topic on this governance and risk management. I know that you've worked with some different departments internally at Automation Anywhere, and you have implemented some retrieval augmented generation systems that these different teams can use. Talk to me about how you're thinking about model use policies, who owns the data, who's responsible for maintaining it, those kind of things.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, for sure this is a loaded topic, but I think the pro tip captures a lot of it, which is you need a robust way to flag how AI is going to be supporting the individual use case. So to be able to ask those right questions. I mean, so basic questions would include, what specific data are you going to be using? To your point, if it's kind of a RAG capability, retrieval augmented generation kind of capability, then what exactly does that look like? What kind of documents, what kind of content? Where does it sit? Is it sitting in business systems? Is it sitting somewhere else? And by the way, we've got some governance questions now, Micah, because who and how is it going to be maintained? Data, like anything else, can get stale. So if we publish version 1.0 of the document and it's sitting in that RAG data store and 6 months later it's out of date, that's not going to help. So we need also some roles and responsibilities to actually maintain those data stores. But I think it's really, really important just to ask those questions as part of the assessment of the use case. And then if we need to flag something, for example, to the governance council, it's not last minute, oh shoot, you're delaying my go live scenario. No, we've been talking to them about it for 3 weeks already. We can give them an early heads up and make sure that we work through those questions.
I like it. Yeah, we mentioned in the kickoff to this entire conference that small hinges move big doors. And these pro tips, I think, are key takeaways that you can walk away with and start to execute on. So excellent tip there. Mark, I want to talk about operating model and delivery now, because I know this is an area that's changed for your team. And I think you have some really interesting ideas here. We look at this from a Pathfinder perspective as designing how your AI and automation program operates and delivers value across the enterprise. And this includes things like your operational structure. Are you centralized? Are you federated? Are you doing citizen development? And then how you're actually delivering on these solutions. So Mark, talk to me a little bit about some of the key things that you guys have recognized in this area.
Yeah, I think the first big piece here is we had to stand up another kind of new organization, which we call AI operations. And it's not that Automation Anywhere was completely new to use of AI, but again, we realized we needed to kind of step it up for all these reasons we've been discussing. So we formed a new team called AI operations. That AI operations function, of course, support what we're doing with Agentic Process Automation. For sure, that's a major piece of what they do. But it's not the only thing they do, right? They've got overall operational governance responsibilities for how we're using AI within the company, right? So for example, what AI tools do we support across our workforce? Maybe they're not used for agentic process automation, but that whole piece. So we stood up AI operations, and then you've got a question around how does your COE interact with that AI operations function? In our case, and I feel like based on kind of my real life experience, I feel like there's a lot of benefits to this. AI operations reports into the same organization as our COE. In other words, we've kept them very much kind of closely coupled, and I think that's been good and advantageous in a number of ways. Again, because we have a very, very close relationship, and especially as all the policies and procedures and everything are evolving, it means we can kind of operate with a lot of with that close communication, working towards the same objectives. I feel like that's been an advantage versus having them as some separate island that we needed to knock on their door when we needed their help. So we've kept them very close to the COE.
And these individuals would really be like the AI experts that are kind of building that piece or that part of your agentic solutions. Is that how you view it?
Yeah, so they're responsible, for example, for maintaining our landscape, our AI environments, all these knowledge stores we talked about, right? So whatever you want to call them, these RAG knowledge bases, we use our enterprise knowledge offering for a lot of this, but they manage all of the governance of that, right? So if a business function says, hey, we want more agents over here, they set up that knowledge store and have conversations with them about how it's going to be maintained. So all the governance over those different knowledge stores, maintaining the AI environment, the AI landscape, that's all the responsibilities of AI operations.
I like that. Mark, you also talked to me a little bit about something you guys have been doing with citizen development. And I think it's really part operating model, but also part, I would say, like evangelism as a way to get new opportunities in.
Yes.
What have you been doing around citizen development, kind of promotion, and then also solving for your agentic use cases?
Yeah, one of the big things that we did early on, Micah, that was it was maybe even more beneficial than we thought was we called it a demo royale, kind of a friendly competition across our IT organization. So the idea there was we sent this message to our IT organization that over this time frame there's going to be a competition, and there were a few qualifiers. Ultimately, it was about coming up with agentic automations and building them and building them to kind of MVP form. And we specified very, very clearly that these weren't to be academic in nature. They needed to solve a real problem for our company. So in other words, we didn't want something that needed to be completely re-engineered or was going to be thrown away. We wanted something that was fairly close to, we can implement this in production and solve a real business problem. It was absolutely fascinating because it got people excited. I mean, the workforce was already excited about AI, but this kind of was the next step to get them engaged. Not only did we come up with a lot of interesting ideas, but I think we had something like 20 kind of new citizen developers. In other words, people that hadn't developed on our platform before. They were performing a variety of other functions within IT, but they also were able to deliver their first AI powered automation. So that's something I would definitely encourage. Give some examples kind of art of the possible, some different things that can be done. Of course, our company has lots of examples of those use cases, and then set up kind of a friendly competition. Really, really neat way to get ideas and also maybe come up with some new citizen developers.
I like that. And that is a little bit of a shift for some people's operating model, but it's also a lot around delivery. And Mark, I want to talk a little bit more about delivery because I think you have a really interesting way of looking at this.
Sure.
Talk to me about how you view what your program is delivering now versus what you delivered previously and how
Sure.
that shift has kind of occurred.
Sure. So I think the point here, and this is kind of the pro tip from the prior section as well, is we need to acknowledge that the types, we can use a word like the type or the profile of use cases has clearly changed. And so the question is, what different types of use cases does your COE or automation program need to support? This Venn diagram is one way of viewing it. If you look at the left-hand side, that left-hand circle is all things automation, which of course was our bread and butter. That was kind of traditional automation or RPA. Then on the right-hand side, it's collided with the whole world of AI. There's a lot of emphasis right now in generative AI. So we're clearly highlighting that, but these worlds have collided. We use the expression "a marriage made in heaven," like putting automation and AI together. So the kind of sweet spot here is in the middle, where we've got these use cases that involve automation and AI. We've got on the left-hand side just automation without AI. On the right-hand side, we've even got some cases that are kind of these RAG or info retrieval agents that are purely AI. But the middle obviously is really where it's where the money is from a value standpoint, where there's a crossover. And within that, there's a spectrum of how autonomous they are. And Micah, you alluded to that earlier. Many of these use cases, they're at all different degrees of autonomy. Some of our use cases are nearly fully autonomous or fully autonomous. Others of them have degrees of how autonomous they are. If you look at the bottom, automations with Gen AI, again, those fit clearly in the overlap here, automation with Gen AI, but they're still quite deterministic. And what that means is that, yes, we are using some generative AI capabilities, but they're deterministic in the sense of, we've got not only a co-pilot process, but we've basically, we've coded all of the different scenarios of how that process can execute. At the top, we've got these ones that are really, agentic process automation. When I'd use the word agentic, and those ones, we focus more on training the model. We did not have to code all of the different scenarios. It was more about training the model. So I think the message here is, we in our automation program, it's like we entertain, support, deliver all of these options. On the left-hand side, traditional first generation, yes, we still have use cases that come up once in a while that are in that category. We certainly have some on the right-hand side. We've got lots in the middle with different levels of how autonomous they are. We want to be able to support the whole thing. So, one of the ideas here is think about what you need to be able to support and then tune your operating model based on these different scenarios. They are quite different, these different types of use cases.
Yeah, I like that. And part of it comes back to what can my team actually support? What do we have the knowledge for? Who else is contributing? So I think there's a lot there, but I really like the way that you're thinking about the different types of solutions that your program is delivering. I want to talk one more angle about this operating model and exactly how you see your team organized, because I think this was interesting as well.
Yeah, so we actually had to update our organizational structure essentially as we started moving more and more into AI and more towards this agentic focus. We thought about how do we structure ourselves in the right way. And this is what we've come up with. And again, this is fun because, Micah, for sure, this is an evolution. If you ask me this question in 6 months, I might have a different answer. But I can tell you that this seems to be working for us. So what we have in this is we've got kind of three major pillars. Intake assessment is basically the first stop when ideas come in. Again, like we talked about, those could be top down or bottom up. They could be top down as it's a strategic transformation we want to drive, or just somebody within our workforce had an idea. But somebody, and this is essentially a group of, I'll call them agentic solution architects. That's not a bad term for their role. They look at it and they understand that whole spectrum we just talked about. So they understand the AI capabilities. They also understand the action layer, the automation, and they help determine kind of where does that use case fit and help come up with kind of a high level design for what it needs to look like. So from a people standpoint, that team in our department has definitely had to upgrade because they had lots of expertise in some areas, but not so much in the other. They really need a broad knowledge base in terms of all of the things that are possible in AI as well as automation, so they can pick the right design. And then we've got AI operations and the automation CoE. What we've got in these boxes is kind of the way I view it in my head. AI operations it's fundamentally an AI capability with some actions being driven by AI. Whereas the automation CoE is fundamentally it's automation with the use of some AI. Not sure how well that resonates, but that picture kind of made a lot of sense to us, and that's the way we've been structuring it. We're finding some use cases. So, for example, a use case that's a co-pilot process. It's involving some invoice documents. We want to use document automation capabilities. That would be on the right-hand side. Surely it's got some AI capabilities, but most of it is the automation that's being executed. And then we've got many other scenarios where AI is doing the heavy lift. Maybe 85% of the use case is driven by what AI is doing, just driving some relatively simple automations. That would be driven by AI operations. So this is not perfect. This is not the right answer, but this is how we are currently structured.
And tying that back to the last slide with the Venn diagram, those two teams, the AI operations and automation CoE, are coming together to create those True. Crossover solutions, right?
Yes. And at the end of the day, one thing we wanted to avoid that I think is important is because we have a team called AI operations, that doesn't imply that that's the only team that needs to know about AI. As I just mentioned, all of us need to understand AI. Intake and assessment surely do. The automation CoE, absolutely they do. So we're not trying to create a team and say, you are the only ones that need AI. No, we need the AI knowledge. We need it everywhere. But their focus is slightly different in terms of the type of use cases. Right.
That is a perfect segue to the next section we're going to talk about, which is people and skills. So yes. Again, from a Pathfinder perspective, we view this as identifying, developing, and nurturing the expertise needed for AI-powered automation success. So this is all about developing, understanding, creating a competency framework around the team that's really going to power the solutions that will drive your program forward. Mark, talk to me about some of the key areas and lessons learned here for your program.
So this would be an area, Micah, that maybe every role has changed. So by that I mean, I can't tell you that there's anyone in our CoE right now or that's involved in our CoE, again, that can be like AI ignorant. The reality is that everybody's role, I mean, definitely including my own, has had to evolve through this journey. When we talk about CoE, skill development and competency matrix, I mentioned this intake and assessment function where we've got people essentially like solution architects that look at those incoming ideas and decide, what does that look like and what's the value proposition and what's the high level design for it. They've had to add to their chops in terms of understanding more of the AI side of the offering, being experts on AI Studio and enterprise knowledge, our product capabilities around AI, so that when they look at a use case, they can say, this is heavy on AI. We can do this entirely with enterprise knowledge, or no, this is really fundamentally a co-pilot process with just a need for a little bit of AI. Is AI even a fit for the use case? Maybe for some people that's a controversial statement, but AI, we don't need to put in AI for the sake of calling it an AI use case. Sometimes there's no good role for AI.
Couldn't agree more.
Business user training, education, and awareness. This has been big because, again, people get excited about AI, but it's back to this. It's probably an overused expression, this kind of art of the possible. But we try and promote more and more. Here's how we're using AI. Here's how we're using agents to solve this problem. We try and put that out more and more. Newsletters, telling those stories as often as we can, so that the business users understand, what is this tool that's now in our arsenal, and how can it apply to my problems. So we're doing lots of lunch and learns, newsletters, all these different forums to say, here's a business problem, here's how agents have helped, and that obviously has helped fuel lots of great ideas. So we're doing a lot with our business users in terms of awareness. In fact, one thing we're doing right now, Mike, is we're doing like I think we're calling it Agents for Everyone program, that helps to baseline knowledge across our whole workforce in terms of what agents can do.
I love that. And this is great crossover to your evangelism and stakeholder management efforts as well, right? Because you're talking about your program, you're talking about what you can deliver, but then there's also some training or some, knowledge sharing that anyone in the organization who wants to learn more can, join and get a better understanding of these things. And that's where you develop those people into, maybe one day a citizen developer, or maybe they're a champion for your program. And we get into those 4 C's that we've talked about before. So I absolutely love that.
Absolutely. And then this last one, Mike, the knowledge-based management training. This bit is to say, one thing that has changed these days is we talked about these kind of RAG capabilities. Most of these agentic process automations rely on certain enterprise knowledge of some kind. Most of them do. It's not just about using some pre-trained model, but we need to leverage some enterprise knowledge that's in a business system or in documents or what have you. So that's another impact is we had some CoE roles. So for example, we had a role that's basically the functional owner in each business function for finance, for facilities, for IT, for marketing, all these different business functions. Those folks, their responsibilities and accountability has kind of been upgraded, because they're not only responsible for saying, yes, I want to go ahead with this automation in my area and standing up for the business case of that use case. Now they've also got some responsibilities to make sure there's governance over these knowledge bases. So again, if somebody's unhappy with the currency or the accuracy of knowledge that's supporting a facilities use case, don't come beat up Mark. There needs to be somebody at the top of the chain of facilities that they can talk to make sure that information is supporting those use cases.
Love that. Yeah, that's definitely a new role that I think a lot of people aren't thinking about. So what's the pro tip for this one?
I think the pro tip is to just bring up, and this is exactly what we did. We brought up every job description, again, including especially my own, all of our job descriptions. We looked at it and said, what does this need to look like if we're going to deliver these kind of use cases? And we found that in every case, there were some updates that were required. In some cases, it was, you need less focus here, but more focus here. You'll see, AI, you'll see on every job description for sure. Things like prompt engineering, there's none of us that can afford to be ignorant about prompt engineering. So just review every job description to see what modifications make sense.
Great tip. So we started this session talking about your strategy and vision and how that's matured. That directly informs the opportunities that your program is going to prioritize. So I want to talk some about opportunity identification and pipeline management to understand how your processes have changed here. From a Pathfinder perspective, this is all about systematically identifying, capturing, assessing, and being able to prioritize those opportunities that align with both program capabilities, so that's the people and skills we just talked about, and goals, which is your strategy and vision. So Mark, talk to me a little bit about what's changed here for your automation program.
Sure. I think we've alluded to it a bit, but our kind of intake and evaluation or assessment process for sure has evolved in a number of different ways. And basically what that says is, how do we look at, as an idea comes in, as somebody submits an idea and says, I want to automate this, or I want to use agents here. What are the different questions we ask, and what are the different ways that we evaluate that idea? And obviously, AI is a key component of it. So for example, any idea that comes to us, for sure, we have baked in that we always ask the question, what role might AI have in solving this problem or in supporting this automation? As we just said, without question, sometimes the answer is there isn't a role. We're not trying to invent something, but many times we do identify a role, and then those are the folks that need to define that, to say AI is going to be responsible for this piece of the process. So that absolutely has evolved. Yeah. Reuse is an example of something that hasn't gone away. Micah, like that principle of reuse hasn't gone anywhere. If anything, it's just grown, right? So key focus on agentic reusability. So your point about different tools that we have, there's just a few more tools than we had previously that we're looking for opportunities for reuse. So we've got model connections, and we've got enterprise knowledge bases, and we've got, we still have things like API tasks and such, but we've got AI skills and model connections, all these things that are new to us, and more coming, where we can always look at, is there an opportunity to reuse this so that we're not just using it for a single use case, but something that we can apply to other use cases as well and gain some efficiencies there.
I like that. And that way you build out your solutions and you say, how do we solve something similar, maybe in a different department?
Exactly. So that kind of design thinking is really, really important. One probably dramatic example of that, a big example of that is, we've been looking at how we can transform different service desks across the company. We found we don't just have an IT service desk. We pulled across our company and found like 13 different service desks in different business functions. That's a perfect example. So we've been thinking at how do we come up with a recipe? We came up with a blueprint for transforming a service desk. Our next question was, how do we apply that service desk, that roadmap to other business functions? Well, what does that mean for reuse? Of course, we're not looking to have entirely different automations and agents in each one. We're thinking, hey, what are the common threads here? Are there some reusable components we can develop that we just deploy to different business functions? Just as an example.
Yeah, no, I love that idea. And I think a lot of people would benefit from that, right? Like, hey, I built this thing. It took me a lot of work, but
yes,
the design that you did, those best practices that you implemented, all of that testing, how do you reuse those lessons learned someplace else to solve what is likely a very similar problem? Exactly. We talked a little bit about the demo Real already. I think that's a great idea for new opportunities in the pipeline. It's a great idea for your evangelism efforts. It's a great idea to engage new citizen developers. Also a great training opportunity too. So that one checks a ton of boxes. Give me one pro tip here, and then I want to move on to how you did some of your definitions for opportunity identification and some things that have changed.
Sure. The pro tip here really is continue. I don't think we can overemphasize the importance of communicating. Here's a business problem. Here's how agents helped. And speaking specifically in terms of what was the role of AI in this. We try and emphasize that in our messaging, right? So here's a business problem or an opportunity we identified. Here's what the agents are doing. Look what AI was able to do. We used AI to consolidate this different data and summarize it and come up with some insights that are served up to this decision maker. I mean, so we want to be as clear as possible in terms of what's the role that AI is playing in solving that agentic opportunity.
Very cool. Mark, one other slide on this topic. I think this is kind of around reusability and how you're viewing these repetitive steps. Talk to me about this one real quick.
Sure. So this is around some of the ways that our questions have changed. So as we've evolved from kind of first generation to third generation RPA all the way to APA, these are some different questions that we now ask. So at the top, it's the question that we were all used to 5 years ago. If you were showing me an as-is process, Micah, what's the thing we'd all ask? Oh, okay, so what are the repetitive steps that we can automate? We'd all focus on that. So look at the way that the questions have changed. Now, if you show me a process, here's where our brain goes. Our brains goes to, in that process, where's the intelligence? Where are the decisions that need to be made? And what actions are driven from those decisions? We would ask those questions. I would say, where's the content? Right? So if I'm looking at a process, I say, where's the content? Why am I focused on things like knowledge and content? Obviously, that's a sweet spot for AI. AI is able to do lots of interesting things: create, update, translate, modify, summarize, et cetera, content. So if you show me a process, my brain immediately goes to, where is the content? Could be documents or in business systems. What's the role of AI We just talked about that. What's the role of AI in automation? And then finally, sometimes it's the first question I ask, actually, Micah. It's interesting. When we're looking at processes and thinking about how we can transform them, one of the first things I think is, what's the important role for people in this process? Again, if it's fully autonomous, there still might be a role to audit results and make sure that everything's healthy. Is there a human in the loop kind of scenario? But where do people fit into this process? Again, these are very different questions from what we would have asked 3 years ago. They've really changed.
Yeah, and I think that last one especially is an important point of emphasis, because as I start to deploy some of these agentic solutions, you want to have a human in the loop 100% of the time, especially as you get started. And then as you start to see that both human and agent agree on different decisions or different intelligence tasks, that's when you start to say, maybe we'll scale back the role of the human, or human becomes exception handler. But
Yes.
Humans are also part of the guardrails of a really sound delivery of agentic solutions, because their role in most of these processes is to hold the agents accountable for doing the correct thing and making sure they're staying on task.
I love that. I love that paradigm, Micah, of, we become kind of the supervisor. It's like these agents report to us. So the role of the person, if it's a fully autonomous process, at a minimum, we're sure as heck auditing the results, looking at it and saying, how did we do? Can we do better? Did anything go off the rails? So exactly.
Very cool. All right, one left, which is all around our development and deployment. And I know this is a sweet spot for both you and I, coming from delivery and development backgrounds, but from a Pathfinder perspective, we view this as building standardized frameworks and templates, solution patterns, reusable components, and robust processes to ensure quality and confidence and reliability at scale. So, Mark, talk to me about some of the things that changed from a development perspective for you and the team.
Yeah, I love this. I think one of the ones that happened almost immediately, and looking forward to sharing more on this, is kind of upgrading our solution pattern modeling framework. So we're gonna have some new solution patterns that, Micah, that we've been working on. One example would be RAG and with unattended automation. What does that mean? That means it's an agentic process that's unattended. So maybe it's running at 3 a.m. using RAG kind of capabilities. A perfect example of that is some of the agentic automations that we have that wake up in the middle of the night and say, do I have some tickets I can process? Are there some IT tickets I can process? In many cases, those are executed within our organization entirely autonomously. It's an example of the next morning I can wake up and say, 15 tickets were resolved overnight. So we've got some of these new solution patterns like unattended with RAG, Copilot with RAG. We've got many of these use cases that use Copilot with some RAG capability. Got lots of them. Think of it as Copilot's doing the overall orchestration of the process, but some key AI components within that process. So these are some of the new solution patterns that we've got. AI-assisted development adoption. So things like our Copilot for automators. So being able to do development, obviously using AI. That also has applied, Micah, for things like this automation requires a Python script. Nobody's going to start and do that from scratch. We're going to use some AI capabilities and get some help with it. And then AI-assisted SDLC and ADLC. We've got that all over the place, and I would encourage any COE leader. Again, this is kind of a passion of mine, to try. I have this expression that the most important process to optimize is this. In other words, if you can optimize the way you deliver automation or agents, that's where the money is. If you can optimize that, it applies to any use case. So we've been looking right at how can we use AI as we assess new ideas? How can AI help us assess the ideas? Can AI look at a process, just a cool idea? Can AI look at a business process and say, here's how I can help? I know it sounds like the Matrix, but how can AI advise on how it can help with the process? How can it help with design or development? How can it help with deployment? Should we be using AI to generate test cases? We use AI to generate what's called requirements traceability matrix. So the kind of functional or non-functional requirements that we want this agentic process to meet, we use AI to do that. It just says, based on this process description, here's 15 requirements that need to be satisfied, which of course we can then have use cases that test, have we met those requirements? So lots of different.
Yeah, and that gets back to your governance. It also gets back to your change management processes because you want to have those artifacts in place and be able to consistently find them.
Absolutely. And the pro tip there is just that this is all about accelerating time to value. I think lots of opportunity for AI to help reduce that life cycle. And that just means time to value. We get the agents out the door quicker.
Very cool. All right, so those were the key 6 areas that Mark identified as where his program has needed to change as they've gone through this kind of transition to being agentic process automation COE. Couple next steps for everyone who's watching. Number 1, reflect and identify the dimensions that we talked about, the capabilities that we talked about for his COE. What things felt like they really hit for you? What areas do you feel like you're already doing well? What areas do you feel like you need to make some changes? Where do you have some gaps? Lean into some of those. Don't feel like you have to do everything that we talked about today all at once. Pick a few small things that you feel like have the best capability of really unlocking some doors for you and start with those. But that's why we have the worksheet for you so you can be taking notes on those things, identifying those key things that you want to address. The next thing is take action, right? You've got your few things that you identified, like, hey, this is an area I think we need to lean into. This has the ability to open some doors for us. So what is your plan for this year, right? 2025 is your year of agentic automation. So what's your plan going forward? How are you going to make those things actionable? This is a great way to share that with your leadership so they know where you're going, update your strategy and vision, align that to your plan for 2025. And then finally, you're not alone, right? You have the Automation Anywhere Pathfinder community here for you. Come and be a Pathfinder community member. Explore our different programs and events. It's a great way to learn from each other, learn from us, learn from Mark, learn from what other people are doing, and connect with our product teams and connect with other COE leaders. And then also get support on your 2025 goals. We've got blog content, we've got tutorials, we've got technical deep dives. We have our product club, we have user groups, dev meetups, lots of opportunities for you to get involved in region. The last thing that I will pitch here is imagine 2025 is coming up, and I want to make sure you're aware of all of the dates. We're going to be in Orlando, May 13th through 14th at the Conrad. We will be in London on June 3rd. We will be in India, June 24th through 25th. Tokyo on July 23rd, and finally we'll be doing a LATAM Imagine event sometime this fall. So please make sure you can join us at one of those events that is most convenient for your region. Mark Goodair, I want to thank you so much for joining me. One last tip for everyone. What is it? Putting you on the spot.
Go be great. Go be great.
Go be great. Awesome. Thanks everyone for joining us. Have a great day.
Thank you.